And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief. And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person. But no, this last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizens suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
Under Keir Starmer's leadership, Britain is drifting away from the image of a nation once admired worldwide for its commitment to freedom of speech and freedom of conscience. Instead, we are witnessing a stark regression in democratic values, not merely through rhetoric, but through deliberate actions aimed at silencing dissenting voices. A striking example is the case of Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old former soldier and now a physiotherapist. He did not carry a sign, did not voice protest, and did not disturb anyone. He merely stood silently in prayer outside an abortion clinic. Yet simply because his quiet act was interpreted as anti-abortion protest, he is being prosecuted under a new law introduced by the Starmer government. This law criminalizes any behavior, even silent prayer, if it is deemed to influence another person's decision within so-called buffer zones. If even private, silent thoughts can be deemed illegal, can Britain still be considered a free society? But the control does not stop there. The government has gone even further with the notion of safe access zones, where even praying in the privacy of one's own home may be treated as unlawful. This implies that individuals can be penalized for practicing their faith behind closed doors. Worse still, citizens are being encouraged to report neighbors if they suspect them of harboring incorrect thoughts, turning the country into a surveillance society where mutual suspicion is not only normalized, but actively promoted. A scenario once confined to the annals of totalitarian regimes. While the public worries about the cost of living, the Starmer administration is instead intensifying efforts to restrict freedom of expression on social media. Police are now able to raid homes and arrest individuals simply for posting opinions labeled as anti-feminist or deemed hateful. Behind the guise of protecting women, this is, in truth, a blatant tool of repression, cloaked in the moralistic language of social justice, designed to silence opposing views. At its core, this is not about protecting anyone. It is about controlling who gets to speak. This is a battle over the control of thought itself, where the Starmer government is not only curbing free expression, but gradually distorting the very right to religious freedom, both foundational pillars of any democratic society. When a government begins to punish citizens simply for thinking differently, praying differently, or writing differently, that is no longer democracy. It is authoritarianism dressed in digital-era clothing. Starmer and his team govern with methods disturbingly reminiscent of the totalitarian regimes once confined to history books, the only difference being their mastery of disguise, speaking the language of progress and human rights. Britain once stood as a beacon of liberal thought, a place where people could speak without fear. But today, under Starmer's leadership, the nation is sliding towards the framework of a police state, one where you may be judged not only for what you do, but for what you think. Unless this path is halted soon, Britain will no longer be the land of liberty. It will become a place of censorship, surveillance, and a chilling silence born of fear.
These job losses are a direct result of net zero, the previous government's EV targets, and what we are witnessing. Is the Secretary of State aware? Is he aware that car manufacturers across Europe are losing fortunes on EV production? They are trying to delay targets, and what we are witnessing is just the beginning of the slow, agonising, painful and tragic destruction of hundreds of thousands of direct and indirect jobs in the UK automotive industry.
Secretary of State.
I can certainly agree that we should be honest, and what the honourable gentleman said there was simply not correct as a characterisation of the UK automotive sector. And all I would ask him to do is don't listen to the government or even the opposition. Go and speak to the industry yourself. Go and speak to the firms involved in this. Ask them about their investment plans. Find out why the honourable gentleman is so out of touch with industry sentiment. Many of the problems in some other European countries have come from a lack of ambition on transition, because fundamentally, if we're selling 80% of what we make in the UK to other markets, there is no long-term market for internal combustion engines. You've got to recognise that and remember. And again, don't take it from the government, take it from industry. But I'm afraid on this one, again, as we had on our exchange, I believe, on steel a few months ago, honourable gentleman's just out of touch with what consumers and business want.
The clash between Richard Tice and Jonathan Reynolds in Parliament has ignited a fierce debate over the future of Britain's automotive industry, particularly in relation to net zero emissions policies and the transition to electric vehicles, EVs. Tice argues that the push to force individuals and businesses to adopt electric cars is the root cause of job losses, placing blame on government policies that, in his view, have severely undermined one of the UK's key economic sectors. Reynolds, however, firmly rejected this accusation, insisting the transition is one that the industry itself desires, and that phasing out the internal combustion engine is a necessary step to keep pace with the modern world, not merely a political manoeuvre. Tice's stance reflects growing concern about the economic fallout of a rushed electrification agenda. The government and environmental groups continue to stress the importance of the transition in meeting climate targets, but the reality is far more complex. Car makers across Europe are now facing mounting financial challenges in rolling out electric vehicles. Several are reporting substantial losses, with some even reconsidering their strategies or calling for state support simply to remain viable. With rising costs, the inevitable result has been waves of job cuts, factory closures, and widespread instability, particularly in regions economically dependent on the automotive sector. Job insecurity is no longer just a political talking point, it is a very real economic threat. Electric vehicle manufacturing requires far fewer components and less manual labour than the production of traditional combustion engine vehicles. This translates into thousands of highly skilled workers, those specialising in engines, fuel systems and mechanical engineering, now facing redundancy. Moreover, the entire supply chain is being affected, from parts suppliers and maintenance providers to logistics networks. If the UK accelerates the phasing out of conventional engines without first establishing a robust, competitive EV industry, it risks exporting jobs to countries like China, which currently dominate large swathes of the global EV supply chain. Jonathan Reynolds, for his part, continues to defend the net zero roadmap, asserting that Britain's car industry is on the right track in this transition. However, his rebuttal relies on the assumption that internal combustion engines will soon become obsolete, a claim that doesn't hold true across the board. While developed nations are indeed pushing hard for electrification, many developing countries, where charging infrastructure remains inadequate, will likely rely on traditional vehicles for years to come. Rather than confronting these realities, the UK government appears to be pressing ahead with inexplicable confidence, as if there is no contingency plan, and the current path is the only viable one.